and couldn't, is my mom's story. Many of you know that on February 13th, my mom passed away very suddenly. We actually still don't know what happened, but she is with Jesus. And so we got the phone call Thursday night from my sister, and had the funeral in London, family up for a while, and we're all good. Particularly grateful to Brent and some of the help and assistance, support he provided over the last little while. But there are elements of her story that she was never comfortable with sharing, that would have been healing for her to be able to share, but more importantly, would be a great benefit to everyone to hear. It will also help you see how simple mission is. There's a lot of reverb on this mic that's not necessary, but how simple mission is, how easy it is to reach out and make a difference, and a few other things along the way. So if you will, I'm just going to jump in at the beginning. The other thing you'll see, you might, surely if you're here, you've noticed that over the last few years we've endeavored to make and enforce some changes into how we do mission. Simply put, going, we want to be everyday people on an everyday mission and make the most of our homes and and recognize the value of relationship. And candidly, I got a lot of pushback on that. And occasionally I got questions that I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know the answer, but that'll make more sense in a few minutes. But conversations went kind of like this. Is this just an idea you got out of a book? I go, no. Are you sure? Did God lead you in this? I go, yeah. How do you know God led you in this? And go, I just know he did. Well, now I'll tell you the rest of the story. In 1954, my mom was born in Stirling, Scotland, and by the time she was 18 months old, she had been left for dead in a haystack on the family farm. Someone found her and nursed her back to life. It got worse from there. At the age of 14 or 15, the family moved to Canada, actually not that far from here. They had a farm in King Township, also Arthur, eventually Baltimore, all in, again, not that far from here in the grand scheme of things. And it's always been my hunch that the reason that my mom's side of the family moved from Scotland to Canada was because instructors, teachers at the school were finally starting to ask questions about why these kids were always coming to school in the condition that they were in. In other words, the police were looking into things. So they moved to Canada, bought a farm. I don't remember if the first farm was King Township or the one in Arthur, but my grandfather, her dad, was unprepared for how cold Canadian winters would be. And so, at that time, that was way out in the boonies. You were out in the wilderness, right? So this farmhouse, it didn't have electricity and all the modern conveniences because they were out in the wilderness. When my grandfather discovered how cold Canadian winters would be, he went out and bought heaters for the animals. Not the kids, the animals. And then went back to Scotland. My grandmother and mom went back to get them. Actually, the way she got her first winter coat was one of her brothers stole it from his employer and gave it to him. Gave it to her. Lest you go, well, at least she had a brother looking out for her. Well, this was the same brother, when her parents got tired of beating her, would say, she's not been beaten enough, you beat her for us. And he did. How could someone survive that? How could someone get through that? At the age of 12 years old, walking home from school in Stirling, Scotland, facing what she had to face. Let me interrupt with this little detail. All my life, my mother detested oatmeal. She would make it for me as a kid, but she detested it, refused to eat it. Even as a kid, you enjoy something, you might go, you have some too. She'd go, no, I can't. As a kid, I never understood why she wouldn't. Later, I learned, she eventually shared that, in the morning, her first chore was to give oats to the animals. If there was enough left, she could have some. When she got home from school, her next chore was to give oats to the animals. And if there was enough left, she could have some. And those were her 2 meals a day until she left home. What gets someone through something like this? At 12 years old, on her way home from school, knowing that she would have to give oats to the animals when she got home, and who knows what else would happen. There were a group of missionaries, not in a church, but in someone's backyard, in the neighborhood she was walking through, who said, we're having a backyard Bible club for all the kids in the neighborhood, and we'd love for you to come. There's going to be food. Food? Something other than oatmeal? And she went, and for the first time in her life at the age of 12, she heard 3 words she'd never heard before. Someone said, I love you, and gave her some food. You shouldn't wait till you're 12 to hear those words. Let me just interrupt and go, when you ask why did he make such a big deal about the importance of gathering around tables and eating and relational ministry? And I know there were questions, why? It's not churchy enough. Where's the structure in the programs? Well, what I can tell you is that my mom is in heaven. My siblings and I serve Jesus. My daughter loves Jesus and is teaching another generation. That's 4 generations because someone put on a barbecue and said, I love you, to a lonely kid. Does it work? I got 4 generations that says it does. So, rough times growing up, and that's how she met Jesus. She was baptized in the North Sea. For all the trouble she experienced in life, her conversion to Jesus was very, very real, and I am not aware of a moment, even in her darkest moments, where she was not aware of the Lord's love for her. And eventually, the family settled in, she met and married my dad, and our first home was in Fergus, Ontario. Eventually we moved to Guelph, and this part I've shared a little bit, but we went to church one Sunday night, and this Crestwick Bible Church, which is still there, and went to church one night. I heard the gospel, drove the nursery school teacher nuts. She probably thought, what a waste of time, and I hope I never see that wild kid again. But I did hear the gospel, and got home, and my parents, finally got me tucked into bed and upstairs in 480 Woolwich Street, and just down from the University of Guelph, and probably thought, my God, what are we going to do with this kid? And it's sometimes difficult to put 4-year-olds to bed. But something about hearing the gospel woke me up that night, not my body, which was already wide awake, but my heart awoke to the realities of sin and the necessity of receiving Jesus' forgiveness. And I was bawling. My heart was broken. And I came downstairs, and I actually remember my dad, his first reaction seeing me coming downstairs crying was more like an exasperated, "What now?" Right? And my mom, listening went, no, there's something different going on here. And said, "What is it?" She listened and realized that the Holy Spirit was awakening my heart and prayed with me and led me to trust the same Jesus that she trusted in that backyard in Scotland years before. And from that moment, I knew I was changed at that moment, and I've never had occasion to doubt that Jesus loved me and was there for me. I've sincerely doubted whether he was pleased with me at different times because of my own behavior, but I never doubted that he was there or that he was real. And, later, what I didn't know about that time, for many years reflecting back on that, I thought, well, it's so good. Like, I'm such a sharp kid, so perceptive that I chose Jesus at such a young age. It's a little prideful, a little arrogant. And as often happens, as I got older, I learned the rest of the story, that they had told my mom, you're never going to have kids. Having a family meant a lot to her. She had my sister. They said that was a close call. Stop it. And she's a little bit stubborn, so she didn't. Lost a child with whom she's now reunited, Heather. And they said, "See, we told you, you're never going to have another child." As the story goes, my mom prayed, and she said, "God, if you give me another child, I'll give him to you." Here I am. And my dad wanted to name me George. Thank God for strong-willed moms. She said, "No, he won't be George. He's a gift of God. He'll be Matthew." And that's what Matthew means. And it's always meant something specific. But that story is just to show there were things, there's something powerful about a mom's prayers and things about my life that were maybe decided long before I came along. So what I want you to see in this is, one of my prayers about this morning is, it would be, just to help you understand, it would be entirely inappropriate of me to get up and go, "You know what, I just want to talk about mom today." No, we're in church. We want to glorify Jesus. But Jesus is glorified through our stories. And I want you to see, first, I believe you have, how simple mission is. 4 generations knowing about Jesus because someone had the guts to step out of their yard and say hi to a lonely kid and say, "There's food if you want it, and I love you." I've shared that actually at conferences where we spent a couple days in buildings that we spent a lot of money to rent, and people spent all kinds of airfare to fly in from all over Canada to brainstorm and strategize and go, "Look at our structures, look at our plans, look at all of this, maybe we can," and I'll go, "Just for fun. Well, I got an idea. I can tell you how generations that I know of are serving Jesus. Someone just went out their door and told a kid they loved him. It's not hard. It doesn't make me popular at conferences, but that's that. So the first thing I want you to see is that mission is very easy. It's very simple. There is not a shortage of lonely, hurting people. An expression I learned from Tony is this: you can't swing a dead cat around without hitting a lonely person. It's not hard. Let someone know that you're there and that you love them. You might go, well, I don't know if I love him. Jesus does, and by faith you can too. Okay, so the next part is this. We're going to fast forward till I was about 12. We were living in Shadowgate, and this is actually the part that made a bigger impact. You might go, I thought you said you couldn't share all this story before, and maybe if you've been around for a while, you've pieced together all those bits if you were listening. Here's the part that you haven't heard. There were several times in my mom's life, up to and including the end of 2019, where she was hospitalized for different mental health issues. And the first time that I remember was when we lived in Shadowgate, Quebec, a suburb of Montreal. And some very serious things had happened that are kind of scary and unsettling when you're the age my sisters and I were. And that's another story that's irrelevant to right now. But my mom was in the hospital for weeks. And, you know, there's a stigma around mental health today. There was more of one 30 years ago. So this was like a family secret, and my mom's wishes that nobody know. Now, what you have to know about my mom, just to appreciate the magnitude of what I'm about to share, is that really nothing, because of how she grew up, nothing meant more to her than family. One thing we learned in sharing stories as my family was together for a little while recently is how really once my mom called you a friend or welcomed you, you were her friend for life. You were not going to, there was nothing you could do to sever that, okay? Except for one thing. If you ever spoke ill of one of her kids, you were done. I'm not saying that's right. Just saying that's the way it was. If you crossed my sisters or I, you were blacklisted, and good luck coming back from that. And family meant a lot to her. So can you imagine the fear, the anguish, the hurt of being hospitalized, it's a frightening thing to doubt your perception of reality. That's scary stuff. And to not be able to talk to anybody about it because of fear or whatever it might be. I know that there would have been nothing she wanted more than this was approaching Christmas, than to be out of there and with her family for Christmas. Around Christmas, I can't remember if she had been released from the hospital or if it was one of these occasions where she was on a temporary pass, but she got a pass. And Christmas was coming up. So I know she was looking forward to it. We were kind of like, as kids, oh, mom's coming home, maybe we can get back to something approaching normal. Around here, it was a big deal. And then her and Dad sat us down and said, listen, there's something you need to know. At Christmas, there's someone that's going to be sharing Christmas dinner with us. Mom befriended someone in the hospital who has nowhere to go at Christmas time. And so she's going to spend Christmas dinner with us. And not to try to fix her, and she might act a little weird, just let it go. But we're not letting anybody we know be alone at Christmas. And so we spent Christmas with, well, this stranger. But that marked me. That marked me. I was sharing this with my sisters as we were talking about future steps and different things. And my younger sister, I was out of the house by the time this would have happened for her. She goes, you know, that's not the only time that happened. I said, oh, yeah? She goes, yeah, when I was 13, around a similar age. There's a lesson there, by the way. If there's unhealed trauma in your life, of something that happened at a certain age, you're going to have real obstacles when your kids get to that age. When my sister was around 13, you won't know how to deal with it. You'll see it in your kids and you won't know what to do. When my sister was around 13, that's an aside. When my sister was around 13, she goes, at my 13th birthday, Shortly before that, Mom had been hospitalized again. And she met some lonely people, and they came to my birthday. Because she just said, no one that I know is going to be alone. And there's multiple examples of that, but even the last couple months of 2019, things had gotten really bad. And she was hospitalized in London. And she would meet people there. This was more of a long-term situation for a while. She would meet people there, though, who had no one come to visit them. They didn't have proper clothes, or they wouldn't be able to go outside for walks because they didn't have a hat and gloves. So my dad would go visit her every day, and every day before he left, she would give him a list. The guy in the room over there needs a coat, and the guy in the room over there needs a hat and mittens, and the lady over there doesn't have nice clothes to wear. Every day she found someone to go, you got to bring stuff. They need help, right? My point in that is this story in Mark 5. Jesus can say to him, this guy who lived in a cemetery, go home to your friends. Tell them what Jesus did for you. How many friends do you think he had? Not a lot. What I'm saying is, my mom, in her own darkest moments, many times, this was a pattern, not a once-in-a-while thing. If there was someone she could put a hand on, if there was anyone in her radius that was lonely, hurting, or needy, she was going to do everything in her power, and my dad's, to make sure that they were blessed. And not... Here's the other thing, just to be real clear. Not in a transactional way. What I mean is, in church, so much of what we do becomes transactional. What I mean by that, to be real blunt, is we go, okay, so you did all these mom swaps. How many people came to church? Maybe we shouldn't do that anymore. Nonsense. I wasn't trying to bribe people to come to church. We were just trying to love hurting people. That's all. You put on these meals. How many people came to church? Who cares? I wasn't trying to bribe people to come to church. I was just trying to love people. And not because I read it in a book or heard a program, but because that's what my mom taught me. In fact, I remember going with her to many churches over the years. And in my experience, I would have said, never really saw her connect or feel at home in any of them. Shared that with my dad. He corrected me, and it reminded me of something else relevant. He goes, no, that's not entirely true. There was a time in Indiana when we lived there. So I had already met Jessica, and we were on our way building our own life, but we were back in Sarnia at the time. I remember this. She had found this particular church where they lived in Indiana and began to feel at home there and connected with people. And when Dad said that, I was like, oh, I remember that. I'll get to why I remember that in just a moment. But you know what connected her to this church? The first time they went, there was a pastor and like one other couple, and they were a little embarrassed. By my dad's own confession, he says the only reason we stayed is because we felt it would hurt them too much for us to leave the first time we came. There were so few people there. But then what began to happen is, after every service, have you ever been to a Cracker Barrel? They don't have them up here in Canada, but in Indiana, let me tell you, you go to eat at the Cracker Barrel. And after every service, they would go eat at the Cracker Barrel. And eventually the crew got bigger and bigger. And they were a bunch of elder retirees, and they were, on fixed incomes. And so my parents, my dad was still working obviously at the time, and so a lot of the people a lot of people going out to eat after every service, they would just go out to eat together. And a lot of the folks would order off of the kids menu. Where did Aiden go, by the way? Is he still? Yeah. They would order off the kids menu because it was cheaper. And as they got comfortable with the group, my mom could be very persuasive. She convinced my dad to start paying for other people's meals so that they could eat more. And so that this wasn't her inviting people in or connecting people. Maybe she did that in dark moments when she was hospitalized. People do different things under pressure. There was one time, there was a family sitting behind them in church as it grew, and they had a daughter who was developmentally delayed, and there was some sort of purse. You know how kids, especially in their teen years, there's trends of what's cool to have? And some kid in church had this purse or bag, and it was an expensive thing. And the family sitting behind my mom and dad, the developmentally delayed daughter was like, "Oh, I really want one of those." I only mentioned that she was delayed because she just didn't have the social awareness to maybe say that a little more quietly, right? And her parents were like, no, we got to be reasonable about money. You can't get that. You can't have that. Well, he shouldn't have said that in earshot of my mom, because they left church and my mom made my dad go find one of those. And the next Sunday at church, that girl had that purse. And you go, well, gosh, she sure had a soft spot for hurting people. She did, but it wasn't just poor and down and outers. In that environment, in that congregation, there were wealthy people eventually, and she would hear, particularly wives, maybe sharing how maybe they felt neglected or isolated or lonely, and she'd find out what their particular treat was. And before Dad was going to work the next day, she'd say, "You have to stop by this bakery and get this and drop it off over at so-and-so's house. Or you have to go to the grocery store and get one of these because that's what Mrs. So-and-so would like." And that was a pattern for her whole life. And I remember at that time, when my dad mentioned, he goes, "No, it wasn't always that she didn't feel connected at church. There was this time in Indiana." I went, "Oh yeah, I remember," because we would talk a lot on the phone at that time. This would have been about 15 years ago. We would talk a lot on the phone at that time as she was getting better, and it seemed like for the first time in her life, she might get to a point of stability and peace. And I remember encouraging her, "Mom, one day you're going to be able to share your story, and it's going to bless, and it's going to heal other people." And it terrified her. Because there were other people, the pastor was having other people in church share their stories. And she was like, "I really want to be able to do that, but I'm scared. What will people think of me?" And that bothered me because I was always so proud of the courage it took for her just to face another day. And she never did find the courage to share her story there in time, and then life took some turns, and we moved them up to Sarnia for healthcare reasons, and then the Lord moved us up here, and here we are. So here's the thing. In all of that, before I shift gears a little bit, where does this pattern bless come from? It comes from Jesus, who begins with prayer and listens and eats with people so that he can serve them and share stories. And I remember more than a handful of conversations, just being real candid. "Matt, is this just something you read somewhere or got at a conference?" "No, it's not." "Well, why are you so sticking to this when it doesn't seem like the numbers are going the way we want them?" By my mom's example, I got 4 generations that say when someone says, you know what, I'm going to begin with prayer and go, God, if you give me one more chance, give me one more child, I'll give him to you. I'll be a listener to people around me. Whether it's a little girl behind me in church or a neglected wife or whatever it is, I'm going to listen. And we're going to eat together. Even if it's in one of the most trying Christmas seasons of my life, I'm bringing people home and we're going to love them. And we're going to serve them. If we can get them clothes, if we can do whatever. The only part she never got to was sharing her story. That's why I'm pleased to be able to share it with you now. There's another part, though, which is this. I remember, I want to just, this message, I just titled Pain from Our Past, and how God will allow us for a while. Everybody has pain. Everybody has experienced hard times. Okay, my mom's story, a little bit, more than a little bit extreme, and I've only shared with you the highlights, or lowlights as it may be. But everybody has pain. And God will allow you for a time as a coping mechanism to just kind of ignore it, sweep it under the rug, and keep going. And that's almost necessary. That's His grace and His mercy. But there will come a time in His persistent mercy that He goes, no, we've got to come back and you've got to heal from that. And the most redemptive thing I know, one of the reasons my mom did not experience the freedom she could have on this side of eternity, I am convinced is that she never got the opportunity in a safe environment where she felt she could share her story. If we're going to heal from the pain of our past, it's important that we share our story. It's amazing how often we want the fruit of the Spirit to grow in untended, fallow soil of the heart. What I mean is, when you keep secrets, when there's hard parts of your story, when there's pain you've endured and you're keeping it in, it hardens you. That's the viciousness of sin. You go, that's really unfair. Yeah, it is. But that's just the way the world works. It hardens you, and then we go, well, we just need the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, beauty, self-control. We want all those things. Yes. But if you want fruit to grow, you got to tend to the soil it grows in. And that's the soil of your heart. I'd be remiss if I didn't share the part of the story that concerns my dad and how proud I am of him. Years ago, actually, since we moved up here, he had stage 4 cancer. That was part of why we moved them back to Canada, so that they would have the health care they needed. And he was in the hospital for surgery back in Sarnia. Stage 4, that's bad. There's not a stage 5. There were some concerns. There was drama and tension between he and my mom, and he was very concerned. And I was talking with him right before we went into surgery, the outcome of which was not at all guaranteed, and about what the future might look like. And he said to me at that time, he goes, I've broken a lot of promises, but I made a vow on my wedding day to your mom, Elizabeth, and to God, and I'm going to keep that. And he just meant whatever he had to do to get through recovery, he was going to stick by my mom's side. And that wasn't an easy thing to do. Candidly, It was kind of like hugging a flailing porcupine, because hurt people hurt people. But he, in essence, with his life with her, would have been 46 years in April, saw all her pain and hurt, and said, "Your pain stops with me. I'll carry your burden. Your pain stops with me." We need a love that embraces our wounds and says, "Your pain stops with me." Spoke with him recently and said, "Dad, I remember you saying this in the hospital. I'm going to keep my vow to her and to God." And said, "Dad, you did it. I know it cost you and it hurt, because frankly, the relationship became largely a one-way street for a very long time." I said, "That must have hurt a lot." I'm being vague on purpose. And his answer was just, "That's what love does. That's what love does." He says, "If I knew that no one else would look after her." That's what love does. We need a love that embraces our wounds and says, "Your pain stops with me." That's what my dad did for my mom for the last 45 years of his life. And the thing is, that's what Jesus offers to do for all of us forever. To embrace us each and go, "Your pain stops with me." It would be disappointing if you can come forward, Jess. Just lead us in worship in a moment. I would be really disappointed, my mom would too, if what you took out of all of this was, "Wow, what an amazing story and an amazing woman." I agree, but that's not the point. What I want you to see is the simplicity of mission. If my mom can find people to minister to in spite of all the challenges she faced, I don't really feel I ever have an excuse. What do? Simple. Find a lonely person, not hard. You live in a target-rich environment, and tell them you love them. Maybe eat with them and listen to them and see how you can serve them. And maybe find the grace to commit with someone over the long haul. That's why I bring up the 45-year thing. You might go, "Yeah, with the numbers, doesn't build up crowds fast." We want to reach as many people as we can. I grant that, we certainly do. But here's the thing. People don't need an 8-week course and 12 steps to this, a weekend session on this. This is what the church is famous for offering. And what it unintentionally communicates is, we'll give you about 2 months to figure out your problems. And after that, do you follow me? What people need, what you and I need, is someone will put their arm around us and go, "You know what? I'm here for you. I'm just here for you. Whether I get anything out of it or not, I'm just here for you. And your pain stops with me." It's what my family taught me, because it's what Jesus taught them and what Jesus offers us all.